The NFC South has gone through probably the most transformation of any division in the NFL this past offseason. You have the Saints finally moving in a new direction with quarterback Derek Carr. The Desmond Ridder era in Atlanta is in full force. The Bryce Young era in Carolina is set to begin. And now, see you later, Tom Brady. Baker Mayfield is expected to take the reins as QB for the Buccaneers. But welcome on into Gold Sheet TV. I'm your host, Eric Pauly, with my guest, Zayd. For today's show, we're going over, of course, the NFC South. I want to mention to everybody again that on GoldSheet.com, early bird special is still up. All three products, GoldSheet, Confidential, and Kickoff, are all one product, one price on GoldSheet. And the LTS picks are now on WagerTalk.com. Also, make sure to like the video and subscribe. It's the best way to help grow our channel. But let's get right into this, Ayad. So the NFC South, the favorites to win the division are the New Orleans Saints. They're plus 120 at DraftKings Sportsbook. Make sure to shop around to find a better price if you like the Saints to win. But the biggest splash they made this offseason was, of course, finally officially getting rid of Sean Payton and having Dennis Allen, who was the coach last year, now be the full-time coach. Payton is not returning. They traded him to Denver. And now Dennis Allen brings in Derek Carr, who he worked with very closely in Oakland for a number of years during Derek Carr's era with the Oakland, now Las Vegas Raiders. I'm going to get right to it, Zayd, and ask you a quick question. So is Derek Carr good enough to make this team a contender? Because last season, Jameis Winston did not perform as expected before he got hurt. Andy Dalton came in and was serviceable, but now Derek Carr has to be a step up in class from Andy Dalton. Are the Saints a legitimate, 9, 10, 11 win team this season, do you think?
Yeah, honestly, and everyone's asking, Zayd, do you think, the Saints are legit now that they're adding Derek Carr? And you mentioned serviceable earlier, I look at Derek Carr as nothing more than just a serviceable quarterback. I think in the past, he's struggled to win in Oakland, and now he comes into a team with, honestly, they have a lot of upside offensively. They just signed Jamal Williams, Juwan Johnson, a big tight end target, Michael Thomas. Hopefully he stays healthy. You got Chris Olave over there. They have a lot of weapons offensively, and I think that this is a team that should be able to put together a couple wins if Derek Carr can play at an elite level. But I just don't see him playing at that elite level right now, and that's why I think they struggle to like the 8-9 win mark, and I don't think they get to a 10 or 11 or 12 win team.
I actually agree with you there, honestly. So I know there's a lot of excuses being made for Derek Carr, which some of them are 100% valid. The Oakland and Las Vegas failed to really put together a great ecosystem of defensive players around him, or their offensive line wasn't great. There was never a time where, the Raiders, whether in Oakland or Las Vegas, were really a complete team around Carr. But on the other hand, you also saw Derek Carr time and time again, late in games, throwing backbreaking interceptions, fourth downs, throwing the ball out of bounds, showing that he's afraid to get hit late in crunch time as well. So I'm actually in a complete agreement with you that I think that the market is clearly relatively bullish on the Saints. They are the favorites to win the South, and their win total is 9.5. But first of all, I'm not sure that Dennis Allen is a good enough head coach. We saw last year that the Saints didn't necessarily have a great, season from a luck factor perspective. They were terrible in creating turnovers, and also with turning over the football. They were last in the NFL in turnover EPA last season. And you can attribute a lot of turnover things to luck. So assuming there is some regression there and that the Saints do see some positive strides within them forcing turnovers or also them creating their own turnovers, that this team should be better. But I'm with you that Derek Carr isn't really moving any needles for me. But another big piece to this is while the Saints defense was fantastic last year, a lot of credit to Dennis Allen and that staff for having this defense do well without even Marshawn Lattimore for a lot of the year. They did lose some big players in Marcus Davenport, Shai Tuttle, and David Onyemata. Zayd, talk to me. Any of these defensive losses really concerning for you, or are you really just focusing in on Derek Carr's inability to be good? That's really going to hold that, that can potentially hold this Saints team back.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's definitely one of the major concerns. The reason why the Saints won a lot of the games last year is because their defense was able to, put together some stops and give them chances to win. Those are big losses that you mentioned. And, have they added some guys? They added Saunders from KC, which is a great defensive tackle. But overall, I think he lost his defensively. And I think to make up what they did last year is going to be very hard on the defensive end. Like you mentioned, Dennis Allen, he put together a great defensive game plan every single week. But I think that it's going to struggle defensively to get enough stops to, pick up the offense like how they did last year. And I think Derek Carr, he's always been a mediocre quarterback. And I think when you could take under 9.5 wins on Carr, I mean, if you look at his history in the past, has he had 10 wins in multiple seasons? I mean, it's been very hard. He's always been losing. And I think taking under 9.5 is worth the play on here. And that's honestly one of my favorite bets covering the NFC South.
Yeah, no, I like that look because a lot of people are very bullish on the Saints and are loving alternate win totals on the over and also just over the regular win total line. But I'm still personally also on this in the same boat as you, where I'm not convinced that Derek Carr is a massive upgrade from even an Andy Dalton last year. And that's not even a knock on Dalton because Dalton played well last year. That's more of just a knock on Carr. But the one thing that I will say that certainly does bode well for the Saints is their schedule is definitely one of the easiest in the NFL. Now, I know that obviously strength of schedule changes throughout the course of the season as you see how teams, perform. But based on some power rankings that I've compiled, this could easily be the easiest schedule, starting off with just playing the Titans, the Panthers, Packers, Buccaneers, Patriots, Texans, Jaguars, Colts, Bears, Vikings, Falcons, Lions, Panthers, Giants, Rams, Bucks, Falcons. Like, I didn't even mean to just list that all off, but I'm looking for a good team in that mix. And you have decent teams in that mix, but the Saints right now, as it stands, are only underdogs in 3 games so far this season. Again, all this is dynamic. All this will change as soon as maybe something happens in training camp. But that is the one thing that I will give the Saints why I'm personally not dying to bet the under, but I'm also not dying to bet the over because we spoke about the limitations of Carr. We spoke about this defense probably taking a step back this year, but the schedule really is a similar schedule, I feel like, to the Eagles last year. And I'm not comparing this team to the Eagles team of last year. This team is nowhere near as good. But from a schedule perspective, this team is not facing any top-tier quarterbacks at all this season whatsoever.
For sure.
So moving on over to the next team, starting up a type, and that is the Atlanta Falcons. They're currently plus 215 to win the NFC South. And there's a lot of just general hype around this team because the Falcons went out. They spent a lot of money this offseason on defensive players. They drafted Bijan Robinson in the top 10, who we could obviously go back and forth about how that's probably a terrible pick, regardless of how good Robinson might be in the NFL as a weapon. They're able to get crazy production from Cordero Patterson and Tyler Algieri, where they really need to draft a running back. Digression aside, though, Desmond Ridder did enough to spark the Falcons' interest last season that they didn't really go in any other direction. They kept him as their starter. They went and signed Taylor Heineke to be their backup. But I'll pass over to you, Zayd. So there's a lot of hype around this team. Is it warranted, the hype around the Falcons this season?
I wouldn't say they're overhyped. I think they're just about right. I think one of the biggest things that sticks out to me is their much improved defense. Their secondary getting Jesse Bates, Jeff Okudah, Bud Dupree. I think their secondary is much, much improved. And then, like you said, people may not like the draft pick, but Robinson's, I think, going to be one of the best running backs in the league right out of the gate. I mean, what he did in the past in college and now bringing it to the NFL, we've seen so many running backs come straight out of college and absolutely dominate in the NFL. And I think overall, this is a team that has a lot of potential. Drake London finished number 11 Pro Football Focus wide receiver last year. I think he's great. I think adding Kyle Pitts to the mix, who's going to only improve every single year. There's a lot of weapons there. And I think Ridder is a quarterback that, he's not going to wow you, but he's not going to really hurt you as much as people think. I think he's going to be a game manager. He has solid arm strength. He's going to be able to limit his turnovers. And I think they're going to really be able to run the ball and then have a defense that they can rely on a little bit more as opposed to last year, which was a team that ranked 31st in sacks, 26th in takeaways. And overall, this was a team that just was horrible defensively.
Yeah, so that's another great point. Is just like any progression from this team is progression defensively because they were so bad defensively last year that if you spent all this money on all these players, especially, solid players, I mean, Calais Campbell obviously on the back line of his career, Bud Dupree, like, is he really that good anymore? Jeff Okudah obviously has that first round top 5 pick pedigree, but hasn't really fully blossomed into the player he probably could be. And Jesse Bates, I think is a great player. So David Onyemata should be a great signing in the middle too. But asking for any sort of progression from the Falcons, like I just mentioned, isn't asking too much from them because they were so bad, especially defensively last year. I do agree that Ridder is going to be a game manager, and that's all he needs to be in order for this Falcons team to improve upon their 7-win season last year. With that being said, I'm not ready. I've seen a lot of chatter about the Falcons maybe even winning the NFC South and certainly being a fringe playoff team. I mean, considering how poor the rest of the field is in the NFC, I'm not going to really count out almost any team in terms of making the playoffs this upcoming season. But I just do not see this Falcons team being a 9, 10, 11 win team. Even if Ridder, the only way that's possible is if Ridder proves to be like a top 15 quarterback, which I just don't think is in the possibility. Can he be 15, 16, 17? Potentially, but they're not going to be asking him to do too much. Zayd, have you taken a look at the schedule whatsoever for Atlanta?
I have a little bit, and I think it's almost funny when you look at all these teams in the division. You have Atlanta, you have Carolina, you have the Saints. These are all kind of teams I feel like that are. I mean, if you look at the win total too, they're all right around the same pact. And with Carolina, with Atlanta, I think these are teams that are kind of mixed together. And even you could argue any team can win this division on the right day, and any team could beat anyone in this schedule. So when you look at the schedule overall, I mean, there's wins, there's losses. Do you see them getting over the 8.5 total? I mean, I don't know, but I mean, I want your thoughts on that because I think there's so many games you could look at and you could say, they could win this game, but they can't. And you're always back and forth. And I think that reflects in the schedule and teams all across the division.
Yeah, so first of all, the Falcons have to get over their hump against the Saints. Their inability to really be beating on the Saints over the last couple of years has been holding them back because obviously if that's 2 losses to the division to start off the season, that's never going to be a good thing. But yeah, the NFC South, just the fact that they play each other 2 times each, that's 6 total games there. Then you have the NFC North, some of the NFC East, and the AFC South on your schedule. Like it's a very easy schedule for all 4 of these teams. So that's why I 100% agree with you that there's no clear-cut answer to who the best team in this division is or who is going to win this division, because all of these teams are priced relatively similarly in terms of the market. All of these teams got incrementally better this offseason, arguably. No one really took a major step back where you would say this team, besides obviously losing Tom Brady for the Buccaneers, still they signed all of their veterans back. So we'll get to them obviously in a second, but I don't think the Buccaneers are this pushover everybody thinks they're going to be. And the rest of the teams that they play are all fringe. Are they not great teams? They're not playing any teams that are going to be probably going to be in the top 10 in quarterback EPA, except maybe the Jaguars, because if Trevor Lawrence takes that step. So I am in just complete agreement with you. That's what I think is it's great for the parity of football that obviously after the Saints and Bucs are really running this division for the last couple of years, that now the Falcons and the Panthers, who we'll get to, certainly have a fighting chance. The Falcons just need to see this improvement on their defense. That's going to be the biggest thing. 29th in EPA per player last year, 29th in pass EPA, 25th in rush EPA, 31st in defensive success last year, 28th in turnover EPA. Those numbers are not screaming 9-win football team, especially when you're just signing veterans. I love the Bates signing. I do like the Onyemata signing, but the rest of the veterans, I mean, you're asking a lot from these older players to contribute too much, and then Okudah, we'll see how he ends up going. So I think 8.5 wins is perfect for the Falcons. I can see them landing 8. I can see them landing 9. So I personally am not betting anything on either way for the Falcons. So do you have any lean either way, or you just think it's priced right and think about them later in the season?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's priced, perfect. Honestly, I think there's so many different, like you mentioned, playing every team in the division twice. It's there's going to be games where one team wins. I think there's going to be a lot of back and forth. Maybe where the whole team wins in the division games. But overall, I think, like I said, these are teams that are evenly matched, that are going to be playing each other. And you mentioned easier schedule as well. I mean, well, all these teams aren't exactly great teams. So anyone playing. Okay, so you're playing the Steelers. Those are games that could go back and forth. You're playing the Redskins. That's a game that could go back and forth. You're playing the Bucs in a division matchup at home or away. That's a game that could go back and forth. Overall, these are all games that are flip-flop games, and I'm just staying away from it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Forgot the Falcons do play the Jets, so if that experiment with Rodgers, which does work out, then that'll be another tough matchup. But no, completely agree that overall, such a just evenly matched kind of division is going to make for some great entertainment. So moving on, though, to the next team, the Carolina Panthers, not getting as much love in the market, plus 400 to win the NFC South, win total of 7.5. We all know what the Panthers did this offseason. They traded away DJ Moore and some other picks to move up and select Bryce Young to be their quarterback of the future. They also hired Frank Reich to be their head coach and, of course, usher in the Bryce Young era in Carolina. Passing over right to you. Bryce Young, what are your thoughts? Because I'm personally bullish on Bryce Young.
Yeah, I honestly love Bryce Young as well. Something that concerns me though overall, like with the team, and it's a stat that stuck out. Like quarterbacks drafted first overall, at least the last 5 quarterbacks have won an average of 3.5 games during their rookie campaign. I mean, this team is a serviceable team though compared to other first round, overall pick teams that are drafting quarterbacks. I mean, you got Miles Sanders, which I think is a huge signing. You have serviceable wide receivers. Overall, I think Bryce Young's going to have the weapons that he needs to have at least right out of the gate to make some noise. I am very bullish on him, and I think that this is a team that could make some noise. Over under 7.5 wins. It's priced maybe right, but I think this is a team that could win games, and Bryce Young is a great leader, and as you could tell, there's a reason why they traded up for him because they really like him.
Yeah, I think this is another interesting scenario where it's not like the Panthers were absolutely horrible last season and had the number 1 pick, then selected Bryce Young, and now you're expecting Bryce Young to hopefully be, the savior of the franchise. This is a team that, barring a couple of unlucky factors, the DJ Moore helmet situation, a couple of close losses, that this team was right on the fringe of a playoff spot in the NFC last year. So I think that that's something to keep in consideration because I think what you mentioned is a great stat. And also just piggybacking on that stat, since 2000, there have been 22 top 5 drafted QBs who started at least 8 games in the rookie season. And those teams won just 39.8% of those games. And only 6 of those quarterbacks posted a record above 500 in their starts, with Tua being the only one since 2012. So the table is basically set that rookie quarterbacks are not going to, or are probably not going to do well initially in the NFL. You want to make any size comparisons to a Drew Brees or a Russell Wilson. Don't forget that Drew Brees, it took him 3 years in San Diego to finally turn into a decent quarterback. He actually had more interceptions than touchdowns over those first couple of seasons, and then obviously the resurgence in New Orleans. So it's a very interesting scenario because I am with you where I think Bryce Young is a great player and will have a great NFL future. That does not always translate to the first season. Also, you add in the fact of Bryce Young's size. He's not an elite athlete like a Kyler Murray. You can get out of the pocket like that. And historically also, pocket passing QBs have a tougher time adjusting to the NFL initially because when you're able to have that off-schedule kind of athleticism and be able to move out of the pocket, while maybe your career longevity isn't as great, but you have more of an ability to make an impact right away because you can make these plays off script. I think the Reich signing is, as a head coach, is going to be good to help because now you have a quarterback whisperer. You could stretch that as much as you want, but you have a quarterback guy in the room with Bryce Young to hopefully groom and the future of the franchise. And you have a team that has a good young defense and also a good young offensive line. So I'm actually bullish on the Carolina Panthers this season. I think they have the makings of a playoff team, especially considering their price to make the playoffs. If I pull it up really quickly, I think that they're right now with DraftKings Sportsbook, the Carolina Panthers to make the playoffs is plus 205. I feel like there's got to be some value in that number, considering again the weakness of the division, the defense being their strength last year, the offensive line staying completely intact. Obviously, injuries can happen. And in terms of weapons, I mean, they lost DJ Moore. Robbie Anderson didn't really do too much. They have DJ Chark, and now Adam Thielen. They also drafted Jonathan Mingo. I am bullish on the Panthers, and I think the Panthers are a team that can certainly make the playoffs in this crowded, very dense NFC conference where there aren't many teams besides probably the Eagles, Cowboys, and Niners who are actually, maybe head and shoulders above the rest of the pack.
Yeah, and you hit a lot of big points there. One of the biggest things for me though, just looking at it, we mentioned the struggles that first year quarterbacks have had, especially number 1 overall pick caliber quarterbacks. I think when you look at the line of 7.5 wins, it's kind of factored in there already in the line. Like you mentioned, 39% since I think 2000. So 7.5 is a tough number to get to. Can the Panthers get to 8 wins? I don't know. So, for me, I would lean under here, to be honest with you. And just looking at the past quarterbacks taken early, guys that are supposed to come out to the NFL and, just absolutely destroy teams, I don't see it happening. I think these are the types of players that need, you look at a Justin Fields who came in, struggled early, but they need that second, that third year of being able to develop, being able to be in an NFL system, learning the offense really. And I think it's going to struggle early on. And Young might struggle early on as well with the Panthers. I just think 7.5 is a number that's a little too high for me. I think they finish around 6 wins. Maybe if they get to 7, but I think 8 stretch for this team, especially with the new quarterback.
Yeah, and it's easy to see why, because again, with this offense, it's also very thin. So one injury to a offensive lineman or a weapon, and next thing you know, Bryce Young is dealing with a very inexperienced and very simply not good core of weapons to throw the football to. So I totally understand that I'm in a boat where I'm expecting Bryce Young to be somewhat of an anomaly because I just read off all those stats and that new quarterbacks coming into the league, especially top 5 picks, playing most of their games, do not turn out to be great initially. They need some time. You can go back to almost any quarterback, especially like I just said, Tua being the only quarterback since 2012 to record a record above 500 in their first rookie campaign. So I totally understand where you're coming from. I just think of from this pack of teams, if I'm betting on a Falcons team with an unknown quarterback and a defense where they're kind of just doing patchwork by signing a bunch of veterans to try to just make this defense better, which hasn't really been a recipe for success in the NFL in the past either, versus a team with a young, very good underrated offensive line and also a very young defense that, again, wasn't the worst team in football last year. They had to go and trade to get this number 1 pick, thinking that they have some potential to be good. But no, I love the thought process you have too in the devil's advocate, because I could also see this Panthers team finishing with 6 wins. Don't get me wrong. I could see Frank Reich not being really able to elevate. I could see this offense really being incapable of getting anything going because of maybe injuries or just lack of overall talent. But I could also see Bryce Young doing just enough to where he doesn't have to lose. He's not going to lose the Panthers games, just to do enough to keep them in it and not turn the ball over and also stay healthy, which will remain to be seen in the National Football League. Moving on to a team that is also very interesting. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going from, of course, Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask. Now, obviously, with Baker Mayfield, we know what we can expect from him. We've seen him play, and we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly with him, most of the ugly being mostly what we've seen recently. Kyle Trask, complete question mark. Talk to me, though, Zayd. So the Buccaneers still have, and they re-signed a lot of their veterans this past offseason. So it's not like they threw in the towel immediately, even when Tom Brady left, and said, okay, like, we're tearing this thing down. It seems as if they're willing to take another looks like they're willing to make a run at it. Whether or not they can is a whole completely other question, but it seems as if they're not going to just throw in the towel and say that this is a lost season. Do you think the Bucs have any chance of, really being better than the 6.5 win total and, making some noise in the NFC? Or are the Bucs, Tom Brady's gone now, this team, even though they didn't throw in the towel, probably should be looking to do so during the middle of this upcoming season?
I think with another type of quarterback in this situation, they could make some noise. But when you look at Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask as your 2 quarterback options, those are horrible options, to be honest with you. And they do have wide receivers in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, like you mentioned. They retained a couple veterans. The offense is not that horrible, even though they are missing a couple linemen. But I think overall this team's going to struggle with the offensive line. I think Baker Mayfield, Kyle Trask are not great quarterbacks, and they're going to struggle offensively and defensively. This team is just, it's almost like LeBron James when he leaves a basketball team. This is Tom Brady leaving this football team. They're going to kind of deteriorate, and I think that's what's going to happen here. And it's reflected in the line at 6.5 wins.
Yeah, so they're not expected to be good whatsoever. They're plus 800 to win the NFC South. My biggest concern, though, for this team is, don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here pounding the table for Baker Mayfield or Kyle Trask, thinking they're going to be, to be able to boost a renaissance for the Buccaneers. But overall, pound for pound, from a roster perspective, like you mentioned, the wide receivers are all still there. The offensive line, they're going to rely on a rookie and a new signing in Matt Filer to hopefully solidify it. And also, they're going to get healthy with Brian Jensen and Tristan Wirfs back. So this offensive line does have potential to be a very good unit. Then on the defensive side of the ball, I love the Kalijah Kancey draft pick. I think he is a sleeper defensive rookie of the year player. I think he is a great force up the middle to be next to Vita Vea. And obviously they re-signed Jamel Dean, Levante David. They have some players that, have shown they know how to win football games, that they're good defense. My biggest thing, though, and why I don't think this team could be good is I think Todd Bowles is one of the worst coaches in the National Football League. And if you pair one of the worst coaches in the National Football League, even though he's a defensive-minded head coach, so it's not as if he's going to be necessarily in Baker Mayfield's ear every second of the day. There's nothing. I don't think there's many worse combinations in the National Football League than a bad coach and a bad quarterback. With that,
Yeah, 100%. I think you hit it right on the head. With the coaching, with just the whole team in general. I think this is a team that's going to struggle early and often. And, you look at their schedule, playing the Vikings, playing the Saints, there's a couple, maybe you could give them a win here and there, but I think this is a schedule that's not as easy compared to the other opponents, the other teams in the division, I should say. You look at the Vikings, it's a tough game. You look at the Saints, it's a tough game. And then even out of the division, playing teams like the 49ers, playing teams like the Bills, playing teams like even the Detroit Lions are a team that I think they're going to struggle with. I think you could argue that this could be a 3-4 win team max. And that's just because of the Baker Mayfield and obviously, losing Tom Brady. And just there's a lot of big flaws in this team, and it's reflective in the line.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. Like another team where I'm not really ready to dive in on the over or the under because I obviously see the case for the under. Like I mentioned, terrible coaching, terrible quarterback play is not getting you far in the NFL. I do also somewhat see the case for the over, considering that pound for pound, talent for talent, this is a decent football team. This is not a bottom of the barrel team from a talent perspective across the entire roster. But with that being said, as we know from being football fans our whole lives and just watching football, just having talented players are not going to get you over the hump, especially when your quarterback is one of your least talented players and also when you have a poor head coach. We wanted to thank you so much for hopping on the show. We really appreciate it. We'll be back on Thursday to discuss the NFC West, the final division preview. We've got all 6 that we've done so far, with the 7th now coming, on YouTube at GoldSheet TV and also at WagerTalk TV. Again, reminder to like and subscribe. That's the best way to help us grow our channel. We'll see you guys on Thursday. Thank you, and best of luck with your bets today.